For all the latest news in North Central Washington, go to ncwlife.com or find us on Facebook. Got a news tip? Email us at news@ncwlife.com or call 888-2020.
Hi, welcome to the show. I'm so excited about today's guest. He's literally one of my favorite people on the planet. Even though I hadn't seen him in 7 years since his retirement, I'm happy to have him here. He is Dr. David Nodder, as most of the community knows him. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
It's so good to see you again.
No kidding. You look wonderful, by the way.
Thank you. It's always nice to hear from your former oncologist. I have to start by saying that you are one of my favorite people on the planet. This always will be, no matter how often I see you or interaction. But and I don't know that you remember this because I'm gonna tell a little story about this. But when I moved here in 2004, my husband had just passed away in that year, and I did all my follow-up at MD Anderson, and I had a very good doctor who did his best to be personable. But I need to be able to come to your retirement party at the end of our I need to have a relationship with my doctor, and so I didn't really have that there. And I remember at the 5-year mark, when I'd been well for 5 years, I was very excited to get the cured word, and he wouldn't give it to me. He said he used remission, he used all these other, and I didn't like any of those words. I thought 5 years I did the work, I'm cured, aren't I? And he said, we don't really say that around here. So then I moved here, and it was very difficult to go for my checkups after Wesley died, but it was hard to face my mortality in such a big way after losing him and being the only surviving parent for our son, who was only 5.
Oh, yes.
So I'm getting somewhere with this, but so I came to see you. You were highly recommended by every single person I talked to when looking for the right doctor for me for my follow-up. I wasn't needing treatment. I've never needed treatment again since the first time when I was 24. And you gave me, I remember talking with you, and I said, you know, I've lost my husband. My son is only 5 years old, and I have to be here a long time. And I want to believe I'm cured. I know technically I'm not. And you said, yes, you are. You're cured. You're here. It's 8 years later. It's 9 years later. You're cured. And I remember thinking, that completely changed my pace.
Wow.
Because it gave me the first, you've got your parents telling you you're going to be okay. You've got, I had my husband telling me I was going to be okay. Everyone's saying you're strong, you're going to be okay. But for an oncologist, my oncologist, to tell me I was cured and that I could live long enough to raise my son, that was huge for me.
You know, a cure is a statistical definition, and with the cancer you had, this isn't true for all cancers, but for Hodgkin's disease, if you are in remission continuously for 8 years or 7 years or something like that, you're cured.
Yes. And that was the thing for me was, how am I going to be on this planet long enough to raise my son? I had to make sure that happened.
Yes.
And he leaves for college in the fall. And
yes.
when I talked to you about that the other day, I said, you were right, I made it. And you said, well, of course you did. And so, I'm not done. I'm going to be here, much, much longer. But it wasn't just get him out the door and then I'm okay with whatever happens. I still want to be here for a very long time. But, and I can't imagine how many patients you affected in that way in the course of your...
Well, I don't know how many, actually. I know how many affected me.
Right. Well, right. So let's talk about that, the history of your medical career. You obviously went to medical school, and what made you decide to go into oncology? A really tough business to be in, especially back when you were first practicing.
Yes. It's a good question, and it doesn't have a clear answer, actually. I had almost no experience with cancer patients in my residency.
Oh.
That's not quite true. We had patients with cancer, all right. It was in San Francisco. One of my good friends, a year older than I, medical guy, that had been with me in the public health service, Navajo area for military service, you might say 2 years, and all of that, went into oncology. And I kind of watched him. I had an attraction to oncology because I like sick patients. I wouldn't be a good dermatologist. I like people who need me,
Right.
and I need to help them.
That makes a lot of
So
sense.
it's a complete dynamic that fits, I don't know, I guess my needs, and hopefully fits theirs. So I had to choose between various practices, have various degrees of patient intensity in terms of illness. And there are a few that are like oncology, like nephrology, where people are often on dialysis. Nowadays, almost every subspecialty has seriously ill patients because that's where we are in our medical care. We have serious things that we take care of, and people don't exactly get cured of them, but they get treated with
Right.
them. But in those days, there weren't many of those, okay? And so
Because there weren't remedies to sustain
that's
life.
right.
Okay.
That's right. The treatments were not very complicated, not very effective, not available, not
Right.
discovered, not developed. And many of them still, of course, aren't. But it's an evolution.
Getting there.
But, basically, to answer your question, I don't exactly know why I went into oncology, but it was exactly where I belonged. I don't actually know why I went into medicine, but it's exactly where I belonged. It's as if God told me where to go. It's not my belief, but it might have been. I mean, I wouldn't be able to say differently. And I don't say differently. I don't know the answer.
So it was about service, really, in a way. It was like, it was the way that you were going to serve the world, really. The way
Well-
that you were going to give something of yourself.
Yes, that's part of it. I guess, what I put down, I recall what I put down on my medical school application,
Oh.
Because they always ask you, of course, and they should,
Why?
why is it that you want to be a doctor anyway? Hopefully they still ask the same question because it always needs to be asked and answered. And the answer is exactly correct, but it isn't all service. In fact, the first part of it isn't service. The first part of it is I love science. I just love it. It's wonderful. Scientific knowledge is so attractive to me and so magnetic to me. I mean, it still is. All the unknowns, I mean, science doesn't stop. The further down you go or the further up you go, the further cosmology, particle physics, the very small, very big, right in the middle, medicine, all those are just fascinating. Well, but I love people. I have loved people ever since I can remember. When I was a kid, I loved people. I was quite shy, but I wanted to love people if only I had had a little bit more courage when I was really young to be outgoing, which I wasn't,
Right.
But so science on the one hand and people on the other. What's that? It's medicine.
So it was always, it comes back to that medicine.
Apply science to human suffering.
Have a fun video you'd like to see featured on NCW Life? Email us at newsphotos@ncwlife.com.
What year did you become an oncologist?
1978,
1978,
when I came here.
which was about the time they started curing Hodgkin's.
Well, actually,
wasn't it?
my oncology training, oncology after San Francisco, which was internal medicine, okay? My oncology was actually at Stanford, which was the Hodgkin's capital of the world, not just the United
That's where they
States.
went.
So we fellows training there at that institution had immense numbers of patients with Hodgkin's disease and lymphomas, which are related. And so I guess you'd have to say I sure knew Hodgkin's disease by the time I graduated. I didn't know a lot about lung cancer or other common cancers, and should have and did learn subsequently in practice, of course. But we had a huge number of patients, many of them cured, and many of the advances leading to their cure came from Stanford.
Right, that's the thing I guess I wanted to say in general. So not just specific to Hodgkin's, but you were part of you watched all these cures start to happen. You watched these treatments turn into cures.
Boy, that's right. It was a totally exciting time to be in oncology because things were just beginning to be studied so that you could actually impact cure rate by giving chemotherapy to high-risk patients with, let's say, breast cancer or colon cancer or ovarian cancer, not all cancers, but many common cancers, not just Hodgkin's.
Right.
And by doing so, when you were treating just the potential for microscopic metastatic disease, before it got big enough to
Right.
see, you could impact cure. If you waited until the cancer came back macroscopically, big enough to see on a scan or on exam or something, you could treat, you could help, but you could not cure.
It's decision making too. You know, I was going through treatment at the same time in the community I lived in then as another gentleman who was treated by somebody else.
Oh, I see.
And it's a balance, you know, 24 years old, I wanted to have a baby one day, I wanted to live a long life, so how do you treat enough to get the cure, but not so much that, you know, I can't have children and, or, you know, all of those things. So it was interesting because he had twice as much treatment as I did, and he was further along in his staging. But when I got to the end of chemo, which to me chemo is very distracting because there's so much that can go wrong, and it's, I remember there was a blue card, and on the front of the blue card is everything that's probably going to happen. It's going to be uncomfortable, but you're going to get through it, and mention it to your doctor if it persists. And on the back of the blue card was everything that if this happens, you need to contact your doctor right away. It may even require a trip to the emergency room. I never looked at the back of the blue card because I thought,
Wow, no kidding.
if I do, I'm going to think myself into something. My mom and my husband looked at the back of the card in case there was something, and we communicated thoroughly during that time. But so I guess the thing that when I got to the end of chemo, it was time for radiation. And that scared me more than chemo. I don't know why. I think because of the movie Silkwood. I'm not kidding. Because of the, you know, radiation exposure and you know, movies that we'd seen. And I thought, okay, well, I'm good because it's, I mean, my tests have shown dramatic response. I'm going to be okay. And I remember my oncology nurse who was administering to chemo every other Tuesday at 9 a.m. And she said, I've only had one patient come back in my 22 years. And it was the patient that didn't do radiation. Okay, I got to do radiation because that's when the cure started coming, right? It was that last little bit that you're talking about that you can't see on the scan but might be there and have a chance to grow back, which you don't want.
Well, and that subpopulation of cancer is by definition the hardiest, the most difficult to kill.
Right, still there.
Yes.
Right. So that for me, because with radiation there's a lot of rest and you're sleeping a lot and you're very tired and there's not so much dramatics to it as there is with chemo, in my opinion. Now, for someone who has gone through radiation without chemo, it's a whole different experience, I think.
That's right.
No, I'm not equating the two. I'm saying for me, I was very sick through chemo. It was a very aggressive chemo. When I was done with that, I was kind of done. I didn't want to do anymore. So in you watching the progress of treatment, you probably also experience a lot of frustration because it can't, it's even now it doesn't quite catch up, but it's doing a better job.
Yes.
So
there's always room for improvement, and the push for Hodgkin's disease, just to finish that a little bit, in recent, well, decades now really, has been not so much to stress improvement in outcome against Hodgkin's, which always needs some improvement, of course, but to reduce toxicity. Because there's substantial toxicity from the earlier chemotherapies, like acute leukemia and other things in the bone marrow. And this whole issue of cancer survivorship has become huge because, number one, there are survivors, and number two, with those long-term survivors, long-term side effects of previous required treatment come to light that weren't really understood or even known previously. So it's a big, big subject.
it is. Okay, so we're not going to stick to any kind of schedule. I can already tell you that for this interview, which is fantastic. I love that you're here. We're going to take a quick break. We're talking with Dr. David Notter. You or someone in your family or someone you know someone who knows someone likely was cared for by this wonderful doctor in our community. He retired 7 years ago. I haven't seen him since his retirement party. I'm just delighted to have him here. We'll be back in a moment.
Thank you.
Please join us weekly for the 12th District with yours truly, Kerry Condata. Check your channel guide for times or go to ncwlife.com for details.
Hi, Hi, we're back. We're talking with Dr. David Nodder today. He practiced medicine oncology in Wenatchee Valley for how long?
32 years.
32 years. Retired 7 years ago. He was my follow-up oncologist for the years that he was here before he retired. I haven't seen you since your retirement party in 7 years.
No kidding.
You look exactly the same.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so we're talking a bit. So we talked about your early days as a doctor and the impact being an oncologist has had on you. So what was it like? How did you finally come to the decision to retire? And we'll talk about your version of retire. Was it completely retirement? But what about that at that 7 years ago, that mark?
Well, it was hard, actually. And my partners in oncology here at Wenatchee Valley Medical Center, now it's called Confluence Health, but
Right.
same thing. Basically, we're fond of saying that I flunked retirement several times. And they actually sang a song at my retirement party, "Hit the road, Dave."
And don't come back. Don't come back.
Don't come back. Well, tongue in cheek, but because I found it very hard to retire, and I don't know, really, in a way, you never retire.
Well, and there's no perfect time to leave a patient
No.
because you
Oh,
can't
no.
wait till everybody gets well, everyone has their outcome. So
Well,
you had to
that's
somewhere in
right.
the interim, somewhere in the middle, somewhere
Well,
just beginning.
there is a distinct feeling in medicine in general, oncology perhaps in particular, for doctors who are either relocating to some other place or retiring, something like that. A feeling on the patient's part has to be of partial abandonment. And that feeling is also on the doctor's part. I mean, I was blessed to have wonderful partners in Wenatchee. I mean, you couldn't have asked for anything better. They were wonderful people. They taught me a huge amount. Every one of them taught me a huge amount of oncology, hematology, how to deal with patients, how to be with people. I mean, maybe I taught them some things too. They would say so. But you know what? It's collegial. And it was such a privilege to work with them. But the main privilege, of course, is to work with the patients. The nurses, the oncology nurses, the whole place was unbelievably capable and caring. But retirement was hard for me. And I didn't actually have a plan for retirement. What are you going to do when you retire? I don't know. I love music. That was a large part of what I wanted to do and did. But it turned out that one of my patients, who was actually still on chemotherapy, ambulatory chemotherapy at the time I retired, that I knew quite well, having cared for him for a long time, he was doing pretty well. Had a bad cancer, all right, advanced, but he was ambulatory and he was fearless. Well, he wanted to go to Alaska. Drive to Alaska from Wenatchee in an old truck. I said, perfect.
You're going with them?
So I did.
Oh, wow, I did not know that.
There were actually three of us. One fellow that he worked with at the DOT, and then he himself, and then I in the back seat of the truck. It was a boy's trip or a man's trip. We slept in some 6x10 rooms, all of three of us. It's Alaska. What do you expect? Anyway, we did a 3,000-mile trip up there, and to pick up a little tiny boat that he had that was being stored near Wasilla and was in bad repair and blah blah blah. It's a long story, but anyway, because of that trip, I stopped in at one of the practices where I knew some people, and said hello in Anchorage, and I said to myself, I like this medicine too much to leave it.
But you can't get your old job back.
Well, besides that, I love Alaska. I fell in love with Alaska for the wildness of it, the scope of it. It's unbelievable. And it just goes on and on and on in this country up there. So I said, I wonder if you might need some help once in a while. And this is Alaska style. I'll be quick if I can, but they said, well, do you have any recommendations from people? I said, yeah, my friend knows you guys, and he works up here once in a while. So they said, oh yeah, he's a good guy. I said, do you want some recommendations? Oh no, that's okay. I said, do you have a contract? Oh no, we don't need a contract. I said, well, then maybe I'll just come up then. How about that?
Yeah.
Which I did.
So how often did you do that?
About, temporary coverage, it's because these guys are so busy.
Fill in for somebody.
Yeah, they call it locum tenens, it's temporary coverage. Always the same group, and maybe a total of 7 weeks a year maximum, so maybe 2 or 3 weeks at a time, maybe twice or 3 times in a year. And always other people around for to help out, because you can't do oncology 7 weeks a year and be good very long.
Yeah, right.
You can try to keep up, but really you have to have that daily contact. The patients have to be in front of you basically all the time for you to be as good as they need.
Right. Right, because you didn't want to be just a fill-in. You can't be a fill-in
No,
doctor
I might be a bridge,
Right.
but the bridge has to be
Right.
sturdy and
Right.
robust. And it has to be a handoff here and there that does not get in the way of their care.
So then you get to this point where you did that. It's been 7 years now. You've been retired.
Yep.
And you're actually, so then tell us that you also did some work locally with hospice.
Yeah, that happened sort of by serendipity. I'm on a little nonprofit that isn't related to Confluence Health that has to do with hospice, support for hospice, a nonprofit. And on that nonprofit, some of us, like Bill Gotthold and I, Dr. Gotthold, retired ER doc, became aware a year and a half ago by chance that the hospice program of Confluence was in immediate danger of being shut down because their director had relocated and given them notice for this previously to Montana for family reasons, so they did not have a director at that point.
And it had to be a physician.
Or we're not going to have in 2 weeks. And so in 2 weeks, Medicare would say, sorry, you don't have a program. So 100 patients, 100 patients would have been, and all their nurses and all the social work, the whole program would have been summarily basically canceled. It's unbelievable, unthinkable. So Bill Gotthold and I and Steve Voorhees and another doctor named Mike Parnell, 4 of us said, we 4 together can do a job that's part-time to start with, right? The whole job is part-time. Maybe we can.
Right. Between the 4 of you,
we're all
you do
kind
a
of
part-time
retired.
job, right.
It didn't work out. Parnell had a schedule that wouldn't be compatible with it, so we 3 of us though continued to do that. So we are the 3 musketeers, I guess you'd say. We are the co-directors of the hospice program, medical directors. The nurses do the work. We are not, it's not a patient care job as a rule. There is some patient care.
Oversight and making sure you're
and
looking.
paperwork and regulation and so on. But what a wonderful program that hospice program is. The nurses completely own everything about that program. Ownership is completely 100% embedded in the organization. It's remarkable.
And so they will have a new director, a new set of directors, however they're going to do it, that's going to continue on.
It will.
And you're truly retiring now.
Yeah, I decided.
From everything, Alaska,
I am.
hospice.
That's right. I decided, it's about time. After 7 years, I probably should retire after all.
Yeah, and so do you have grandkids, and you have your fiddle, and you have your interests,
That's
your
right.
family?
I want to take, my grandkids are all in Western Washington. My wife has a double dose of the grandparent gene. It lives on the X chromosome, so she has 2 of them. I just have 1, right?
Yes.
That's a true statement. But so what are we going to do? We're going to do everything. I'm going to take those kids kite flying. I'm going to take them to Alaska, right? Fishing. Not. I won't be in the ICU. I'll be fishing on the river. Yeah, I got to do this.
All these kinds of things. So enjoy your retirement, and thanks for all you do, and I hope to see you around a lot sooner than 7 years from now.
Pleasure seeing you again.
All right, thanks. We'll be back next week.
Stay up to date with what's happening in North Central Washington. Go to the NCW Life Community Calendar at ncwlife.com.